This is the first day of our lives, the vast majority of us, when we have woken up and it is crystal clear that there is an American government in power that intends to torpedo completely the 80-year transatlantic alliance that has kept the peace in Europe since 1945, that is absolutely determined to interfere in the internal affairs of the UK and its European partners, and wants to bring about a situation in what this document refers to as patriotic political parties find themselves much more easily achieving power in Europe, a continent that this document agrees or argues is at risk of civilizational erasure because it has allowed so many immigrants into European borders that the entire future of the European project is not in doubt, but according to this document, absolutely bound to collapse, and to collapse in a way where the document argues that non-European populations will become the majority populations in so many European states that NATO will basically fall apart of its own volition, because for some reason those non-European majorities, whenever they come about, will not favour the idea of the mutual defence covenants that lie at the heart of the NATO Charter. It's unclear why they wouldn't do that, any more than it is opaque in this document what Donald Trump means by patriotic political parties. Well, but you don't have to be a swami to understand it. I mean, they don't think the Democrats here are a patriotic political party, so I certainly don't think they think Labour or possibly even Kemi Badenoch's Conservatives are patriots. This is an effort to sweep Reform UK into number 10 Downing Street, and it's all written down in black and white.
I mean, it's hard to know where even to begin, because it is simultaneously dangerous and gibberish. The idea that Europe is facing civilizational decline, or that the European Union membership is problematic at a time when support for membership of the European Union in EU countries is the highest it has ever been, not least as a consequence of the Brexit that these clowns championed, and indeed that Farage, of course, who you mentioned quite rightly as a potential beneficiary of this dangerous gibberish, was a key proponent of. So what is the point here? I mean, civilizational erasure is, well, not that long ago, it literally would have been the language of a white supremacist in the darkest corners of social media. And, of course, it still is. It just happens that they're in the White House now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think all of this is clarifying. Everything in this document and everything we've seen, particularly over the last 10 days here, the racist, bigoted, fascistic approach, for example, to Somalis living in Minnesota, now being dragged off the streets by ICE and Border Patrol agents as a result of Donald Trump's white supremacist position that he took at the White House last week, combined with this document, underscore just how far this country has moved officially. This is now official government policy. It echoes the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, which was the doctrine promulgated by President James Monroe that said the Western Hemisphere is uniquely America's sphere of influence. It sent a warning to European powers not even to think about messing with countries in Latin America. Of course, the European powers in many cases didn't pay much attention to the Monroe Doctrine. But there is a real challenge here in this document to Keir Starmer particularly, and to other European leaders, although I think we've seen in the last few days that Emmanuel Macron of France and Friedrich Merz of Germany certainly are very aware of the extremely dangerous waters into which the transatlantic relationship is now sailing. And the challenge is you can't read this document, and I would encourage everyone to read it. It's only 29 pages, and I mean, it's quite entertaining in many ways, given the manner in which, as you've been reflecting, it has been written. The real challenge here is that openly the United United States is talking about interfering in the affairs of our country and others, trying to foment in those countries that haven't left the European Union a popular uprising to try and persuade people to leave the European Union, and absolutely in our country determined to grease the wheels for those patriotic parties to find themselves in a position where they can walk into number 10 Downing Street and the great offices of power and state in other European countries as well. It's as absolutely talking without naming those parties about bringing about an AfD victory in Germany, seeing Marine Le Pen win in France, Geert Wilders back in power in the Netherlands. That is the official strategy. And you know, I know they're all talking with Volodymyr Zelensky about the future of Ukraine. This document makes it clear, again, that President Trump's going to capitulate to Russia on Ukraine. But I think they're also talking about how on earth are they going to react to this realization that America no longer has their backs.
And if there were any room for doubt or hope, it has, as you point out, been summarily removed in the space of 29 pages. And, you know, the historic import of the moment, you are, as I mentioned at the outset, one of the only people who seems, at least in print this morning, to be properly recognising it. What's it like over there? I mean, specifically, for example, I can't quite conceive of what would have happened if 10 years ago a US president came out with a national strategy announcement that was greeted with undisguised glee by the Kremlin. I mean, you take my point. What do Americans realise what's going on?
Well, certainly the foreign and defence policy community in this town recognises what is going on. And I had messages over the weekend from one former State Department official who had served in previous Republican administrations, describing this document as shameful and disgraceful. And it's not just what it says about Europe that is so concerning to many of these people. It's the broader view. Any time in the past you've picked up a national security strategy by a previous president, it has focused relentlessly on the Ronald Reagan vision. America, the shining city on the hill, the beacon of democracy for other countries to emulate, accentuating the need to spread freedom throughout the world, to stand up for human rights, to stand up for political prisoners rotting in gulags in various dark corners of the planet. This document doesn't use the word democracy until page 16, and it only uses the word democracy 3 times during the entire document. In fact, it makes it clear that official US policy is no longer to spread freedom and democracy and protect human rights. Official US policy now is to accept that all sorts of countries have all sorts of different governing systems and national traditions, and it's not the business of the United States to interfere in those. And that's one of the reasons why there was an open bar all weekend at the Kremlin. If you look at the section on Taiwan, it will have provided some comfort for President Xi Jinping, because the Americans are basically saying, yeah, we'll do a bit to defend Taiwan, but it's really going to fall to North Korea and Japan to take that on if they want to. If you're Kim Jong-un in North Korea, you read this document and you think, oh, terrific, all is good, because they're not going to come in and battle for regime change here. It's sort of dissonant, of course, with the plan to try and defenestrate President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, but that is all about getting America's hands on Venezuelan oil. And all of that is revealed in this document as well. If you look at the section on Africa, which is tiny, and at the end of the document, it's almost like a footnote on page 29. I mean, Africa policy is basically to partner with countries in order to access their valuable minerals and their rare earths. That's really the only interest that the United States identifies in the entire continent of Africa. We want to get our hands on their minerals. And this is all about commercial trading relationships within that prism of sort of American expansionism. He doesn't talk in this document about seizing Greenland or making Canada the 51st state Gate or building Trump Gaza. But that's the tapestry that lies behind the words that are on this page.
Do you know, there's two stories in the news today that ostensibly don't have everything to do with this story, but in other ways they have everything to do with it. The first is Margaret Atwood, the author, telling Radio 4's Desert Island Discs yesterday that her Handmaid's Tale type regime now seems more plausible than ever. This is an authoritarian dystopia, of course, where women are forced to reproduce. She says it's become more and more plausible in recent years. And then, of course, Musk joining these bizarre attacks on the EU, indeed calling for it to be abolished, coincidentally, shortly after he was fined 120 million euros for breaching digital services law. So some of the answers to the question of why are they doing it can be quite straightforward. Some of them I find rather more opaque. Is it simply... obviously, the racism is both the beginning, the middle, and the end of much of this. But racism with no purpose. What is the purpose? If Trump intends to do whatever the hell he likes on the world stage, then he has to acknowledge that the other big autocrats like Putin and China can also similarly behave with impunity. Or am I missing something?
No, not at all. I mean, there are several analysts here, again, at least one of them who served in a former Republican administration, who argue that Donald Trump's essential strategy is to become one of the big men on the world stage. He wants to be the big, strong man alongside Vladimir Putin, alongside Xi Jinping. I think you're absolutely right to cite those messages on social media over the weekend by Elon Musk. He's now endorsing the abolition of the European Union. And whether it was coincidental that he began that campaign hours after this national security strategy was published or not, I'm not certain. But the national security strategy gave him the freedom to do that. We also saw an extraordinary message posted by the Deputy Secretary of State, Christopher Landau, this weekend. And to put him into context, this is the guy who goes to the airport here in Washington to welcome Afrikaner refugees from South Africa, the only refugees the United States is currently accepting. He said the United States cannot pretend that the US and Europe are partners while allowing the EU's unelected and unrepresentative bureaucracy in Brussels to pursue policies of civilizational suicide, whatever that means. But what he's saying there is clear. The partnership between the United States and Europe, in the form that we have all known it throughout our lives, is, from his perspective, at an end, because he thinks in some fashion the EU is pursuing policies of civilizational suicide. And that message undoubtedly was sparked as a direct result of the publication of this national security strategy.